TGI, the global island.
Yo, what's good? How are cognitive heuristics and logical fallacies paradigm shifting? What about all the primary sources that are left behind? First principles and Teslas? Are we being all manipulated by big tech? All models are wrong, but some are useful. Society is not working for all people. You know, our generation is going to be worse off than our parents. Coco Melon? Balancing creating and consuming? Gratitude bombing? Stoic acceptance.
Yeah, so I mean, fundamentally was the first word that I thought I was a genius for using. I remember when I was a little kid, I always struggled with the English language. So when I learned the word fundamentally, because I heard it in a lot of TED Talks, I was like, dude, I'm going to write a book one day and it's going to be called Fundamentals, and it's going to be all about how the word fundamentally created this exponential growth of learning, because it made me feel intelligent, and just me feeling intelligent made me more curious and I had more motivation to actually learn.
I was having a similar conversation with one of my friends in my program, and what they were discussing was when they learn heuristics, they were like, oh my God. I understand so many more things now. They did their undergraduate in psychology, and they are pretty smart from what I can gather. But, it's just so funny that these certain words, when we use in certain realms, it's that's it. I got it.
I mean, totally, dude. It's literally like a paradigm shift, it's like your eyes were blind your whole life and now you can finally see. I think it's very akin to logical fallacies in philosophy, and then all of a sudden you watch Ben Shapiro destroy leftists and you're like, oh, boom, there's logical fallacy. Same thing is with cognitive biases, heuristics, all the same.
Well, it's a new lens on life. It's like you're trying to understand the code of the base code of reality, the way that humans interact.
It's kind of like the code of social science.
Certainly, to an extent,
Yeah.
And I think this is really it's being made fun of, I think, with generative AI, because I wonder how much of humans are actually generative. You know what I mean? What level is everything that we do just not truly actually creative, but rather just completely generative to the situation that we're in?
What's the difference to you?
I'll know it when I see it. It's kind of hard to define. You know what I mean? There's never really anything new. Nobody really actually creates
nothing new underneath the sun.
Anything new.
Ecclesiastes.
Everybody just kind of works on past things. There is different ways to look at it, and it gives you this great perspective, and you can see things going along down a certain path. I could connect Charles Baudelaire, who is a dark French poet, to Otto Rimbaud, who is a very bohemian French poet. I could bring that all the way to Jim Morrison.
Okay, so we could say that bridge building is different than novel thoughts, right? A bridge builder is someone who creates a novel thought in the sense that they're taking two separate perspectives or ideas and collaborating on it. But a novel thought is something where it's even the actual base principles are something that's so unique to itself.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to start with it. And I think when someone starts having a conversation that's beyond generative, I think this was we could kind of see this in that conversation that Peter Thiel and David Graeber were having, because Graeber was actually doing first source.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. What's it called?
It's called primary source.
He was actually doing primary source research and creating ideas from this, some of which actually came from jokes that he then went out and was like, wait, actually, there's some
merit to that.
There's some merit to that. Whereas everything that Peter Thiel was saying was completely generative. And I feel people like Peter Thiel and, even to that extent, Ben Shapiro, those that are, very intelligent and great at debating, they aren't actually prepared for somebody that's actually creative like Graeber was.
I disagree, though. I think that David is being generative. So have you heard of the concept first principles in physics?
No.
Okay, so I learned this from Tesla engineers. When car manufacturers were kind of creating the power plants that all the robotics that actually make vehicles, they did this in I think the 80s. And so now when they redesign cars, it's really hard to make it that much different, because then you have to then redesign all the manufacturing robotics that actually make the vehicle, right? So they don't really changed that much. And what Tesla, when Tesla was, exponentially growing and they were building their factories that were going to build the new Teslas, they were in an amazing position where they had the ability to redesign everything from the ground up. And so what they thought is, okay, first principles. What does a car fundamentally actually need? What does each system in a car really need? And what are the redundancies that we actually don't need? Or maybe some redundancies that we do need that older cars don't have, right? And so they were able to redesign every single part and system of a car from the ground up. And because of that, Teslas are now the safest car you could possibly drive. Some scientists even argue that you literally don't even need a seat buckle to be in a Tesla. They were also able to bring the cost down of manufacturing dramatically because of that. And so the whole concept of first principles is asking yourself, okay, forget about what I've been told about the situation. Forget about what has been done in the past. How do I think novelly about the situation, and what does it fundamentally actually mean and need? And if you take that physics perspective and that engineering design perspective to any sort of topic, that's when you're becoming much more novel in your thinking instead of, collaborating and just connecting.
But that's what Graeber does. He really questions the entire system as a whole and goes, wait a second.
Yeah, doing that, I'm in agreement. But I think him taking older ideas and bringing them into a 21st century light, I think that's also generative. But I think his philosophical work is novel.
Well, it's not even that it's generative. It's just lost knowledge that hasn't been shared. So that's why people such as Peter Thiel have no idea, because they're not an anthropologist and they don't actually study. They study the known history, but that's the fun thing about being an anthropologist is you bring forward the history that was totally unknown to everyone, except historically, which is often called as lost history. You know what I mean? If we discover in Mali, like if we are able to decipher in the city of Timbuktu all of the ancient scrolls that they have from their ancient universities, is this now like when we now interpret this, is that then generative, or is it rediscovering information and then taking that information and applying it to now, So
I view that as generative. To me, novelty making and original thoughts has to do with physics, where you're literally questioning the fundamental properties of the universe and you're discovering new subatomic particles. Or when you discover a radically new concept that doesn't even draw upon older concepts, if that makes sense. It's hard for me to give you an example that's not physics, because I think that's the easiest. When physicists discovered the Higgs boson particle, right? It was theoretical physicists have hypothesized that this particle had to be there based off of the mathematics, but now we have experimental physics data that actually give us this new novel information and make it concrete into our knowledge. But we don't have to get...
But physics is really looking at some stuff that already is, and you're just trying to uncover it anyway. That's really... Physics isn't creating anything new.
If you believe that there is an objective world out there and we're discovering truth instead of creating truth. And that's a philosophical perspective. It's some people believe that math is created and some people believe that math is discovered.
Well, math... I like that, what is it? His name? The statistician George Box. The all models are wrong, but some are useful.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the truest things. I know nothing of physics, but
I don't think that that's a philosophical claim. I think that that's a human claim, that we are just so finite in our understanding, and we are constantly growing in our understanding of the objective world outside of there. And so we cannot become dogmatic to our models. We have to understand which models are going to be the most useful in the time period that we're at, and with the knowledge that we have. But let's talk about creating versus consuming, because one thing that's very nerve-wracking is we're all very addicted to algorithms that try to hijack our reward pathways that motivate us towards certain behaviors. And right now we're being motivated towards lots of consuming and not a lot of creating. And the other day I was actually thinking about this, because we often talk about how physics is kind of not progressing in the last 50, 60 years, or maybe it is, and the secret intelligence services are actually, the ones behind it all. But a lot of fields besides the world of bits, and this is an argument by Peter Thiel, he believes that we are over prioritizing the world of bits and we're under prioritizing the real world of materials, like architecture, like interior design. It still all looks like the 1960s in its fundamental properties. And so could we argue that because we have become so consumerized, is that even a word? Because we are consuming more than we're creating, and because we have a lot of our free time is literally just all that motivation and energy is just being sucked up by the big tech companies who get us addicted to just consuming on our free time. When, before this technology is on your free time, maybe you did some introspection and you had more thoughts and you're able to maybe create. Or maybe I'm completely wrong and I have a bias to this, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's funny that Peter Thiel thinks that, because I feel like he champions a system that is destroying creativity.
Say more.
Say more. That's exactly the debate between him and Graeber. The idea of, well, what do we do in our society? What does our society allow? And somebody that's so ingrained in that sort of, I don't know. He feels like a Friedman capitalist to me. I'm not an economist, so I can't really describe that. But just simply think things aren't working. We don't have a space for it anymore. And instead of allowing a space instead of following what Keynes originally envisioned, where, technology got better and we would all need to work less, we're now working more, and we're the middle class. Like, this is the first generation where we're going to do worse than our parents.
Yeah. And our productivity is 10 times our parents.
And which is insane. And I think you're right. We are all being manipulated into this. And you can't really blame one particular person, but it just is all manipulation. I'm having
a lot of plausible deniability because these systems are kind of motivating certain really bad incentive structures.
Therefore, this is why I sort of agree with a lot of anarchic ideas that
man got us anarch smuggle.
No, I mean, it's nothing's really questioning this, and nothing's really developing what's next or what's the way sort of around it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the god-awful TV show Cocomelon, but this show is...
Yeah, it's scary. It's so scary.
I actually feel it's evil because of the camera angles, the brightness, the colors. It is overstimulating at every level compared to G.I. Joe. Yeah, it's just, I will never let my kids watch that. And I actually think that YouTube Kids and Cocomelon and these things, I now actually put these things more in the area of evil, and they're trying to create...
Robert Epstein is actually tracking these things as well. And he's working with a bunch of parenting groups as well. On my road trip to talk about Cocomelon, whenever we went places, because we were just joking around about how funny the Cocomelon, we would just randomly do that, and we would be in a Target, and kids would start running to towards us. We're this is so so creepy. We were in In-N-Out, and we just played the Cocomelon. Every single kid in the In-N-Out turned their head to look. It's what is going on?
It's literal. If you compare a kid watching that to anything else, it is brainwashing. There's something
that was brain rot before brain rot.
It's brain rot at next level.
Okay, so creating versus consuming.
I feel that that's creating a consumer society. So therefore, they're creating consumers by doing that. No, but I mean, you can also consume in a way that is healthy. And I feel that we've lost that, I had a discussion with one of my friends of I read, so many books this year. I was discussing different books with different people, a couple of them, they were like, oh, I read this many. Oh, I read that many. I'm like, I read 6 books this year. But when I read a book, I will sometimes... even if it's fiction, I will sometimes read 5 pages and then really think about that 5 pages, sometimes for a week long. And then I'll go back and continue reading. And I think that's a really healthy outlet. And I think it's really having a healthy thing with consumption, just as it is having a healthy relationship with creation.
Yeah.
And I'm always curious because I know in this realm, you're always going so, scientific, you're going so empirical, and I'm being the freaking hippie. So what made me attracted to this sort of topic was, what do you find out of it?
Yeah.
Where's your place with it?
Great question. I feel that I have a very good kind of spidey sense of my internal psychology on this topic. So if I wake up in the morning and I am doing a lot of creative work, writing songs, or doing more of the scientific cognitive creative work, I know 2-3 hours sometimes even like up to like 6 hours, I just get like creatively like kind of burnt out, and I feel that my cup is like empty. And then I go, okay, I need to consume YouTube and I need to like eat food, right? And then now I'm just consuming, and like it feels really good, and like I'm really focused on consuming, and I'm literally not even talking. I'm trying not to think besides like what I'm learning. And then now my cup is full, right? And then I get to a place where it's like my cup is overflowing because I'm watching too much YouTube. So I like throw the phone away, and it's like, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing, and I need to create now. And I feel that, I don't know, I feel I have a really good internal sense of this, and I know exactly when I need to stop and when I'm like experiencing diminishing returns on both ends, when I'm creating farther than I actually need to create, and when I need to like actually stop and come back with fresh ears, or when I'm consuming too much and I know that I'm actually not learning what I'm consuming, and I'm just doing it to be stimulated. And then I know that now I need to take the personal responsibility and actually get myself to have the executive function to start and actually create something novel. Plus, also, like, the other question that I ask myself is, like, I want legacy. I don't want my legacy to be my YouTube watch history. I want my legacy to be the things that I create, because I'm going to die one day. But the things that I create, like, the thought that, like, my kids one day are going to be able to, like, listen to all these podcasts, or be able to go into my hard drive and, like, hear literally, like, 600 horrible songs by their dad is, like, a really cool thought to me. And I want to create much more than I consume, because I want a legacy of what I did more than my YouTube watch history.
Just a list of a book list, basically, but a YouTube list instead. No, I mean, I get that. Do you ever find that there's somewhere sort of like in between where you're like, you kind of just wake up and it's not sort of to consume or create, but it's rather to kind of just be with it a little bit?
No, I have panic OCD. If I'm not maximizing the utility of every possible thing in my life, I will just shame myself. But here's the thing. I think with, cognitive behavioral therapy, with my meditative practice, that's kind of my outlet that kind of gives my OCD more structure. I don't think I have OCD. Maybe I do. I don't know. But the point that I'm making is that I do have a personality temperament that wants to push my potential as far as it possibly can be. And when I'm not living up to that, I do kind of feel very gross. I feel like I feel like, damn, bro, like, you're really wasting your life. Even though I'm like so young and I feel like I do a lot, but it's not even like a deeply negative self-talk. It's like dude, there is so many awesome things that you can create. And I have a very creative mind where I'm always thinking of different possibilities. And so I try to hold my feet to the fire of like, okay, you came up with that really great thought. Now let's try to make like a step forward towards actually actualizing that.
I notice you in some of your creative writing or ideas that you send me, like, outside of this, you definitely, build on things. But it's funny because I think we have such wildly different views, because my idea of like outside of that is like, I love staring at trees. I love like staring at nothing. It's so just like, it takes me in like entirely. Like I was before class yesterday, I was sitting in the atrium or the lobby or whatever, and I could just appreciate so much of the mid-century, like so much of that design, like in the building. Even though the colors are all wrong and whatnot, you could tell that it was made from a certain level. And I was just looking at the ceiling panels, and I was just like, wow, just totally taking it in.
Sure.
I could have been working on papers. I could have been studying for class. I could have been going over the notes for it. But you know what? I actually ended up doing better in class because I kind of totally just like shut it off.
Sure.
Have you ever tried that?
So it's
or you just can't even let yourself do it?
No. I have, but it's interesting because I don't do that for like objects. I used to, like, when I was very depressed, I realized that if I like gratitude bombed, if I like went in my kitchen and like looked at every appliance I had and be like, wow, like, I have an oven, dude. Like, I know it sounds crazy. Okay, I was struggling, right? But like, I looked at my oven, I'm like, dude, how many thousands of years would it take to actually rebuild this? Like, if you were to throw me in a forest and I had to rebuild an oven, I don't even think I would be able to do it, right? So, like, I was just so grateful for every single part of the oven, right? And I think that practice served me very well. I think the thing that I do often now in my life that's on kind of paying attention to like the present moment is a little bit more abstract, where I take a step back when I feel like I'm like trying to live up to my potential and I'm thinking about all the next goals. I take a moment and I'm like, dude, life is actually pretty awesome. And like, this is not going to stay this way. Like, you're going to have more responsibilities in the future. You're going to have maybe a larger, load of stress. And right now, like, you have a lot of free time to do a lot of awesome creative pursuits. You get to watch, YouTube. You get to eat amazing food. Like, your back doesn't hurt because you're not like 45 and like old. And I take those moments of like, life is really awesome, and I am just so grateful for the moment that I'm in right now. And I do think that that's like a very important grounding ritual that I do often.
So first off, I want to say screw you. My back hurts. I have no time. I have responsibilities. Dude, I have all the opposite. But
dude, come to the gym with me. I'll get you. I'll get you strong.
But at the end of the day, that last part that you said, I think is really the most important part of it. And one thing that sort of I still struggle with is that sort of this sort of stoicism of the acceptance of like, okay, things are bad now, but I'm enjoying it. Things are good now, but I'm enjoying it. But what if things get bad later, and like not accepting that, or like trying, I it goes back and forth with me. Like, am I okay with this now because I'm like accepting of it now, or like, am I not okay with the future because there's this like anxiety over the future? And, it's not even like that comparative thing. So it's interesting to see then the way that you sort of operate, but it makes sense. I feel like I see that in some other people, like Chris Williamson. Like, he totally strikes me as the person that, like, when he was before Love Island reading that book and like came to like had that existential crisis, and then he goes on one of those like shows, like, and I feel like he's just been kind of building from there, especially like through his podcast. And I see like very similar in you, but that's just one experience of many. Like, it's really, we all have different levels, I think, with this. That's why I was curious about yours.
Definitely, dude.
It's your method, your lens, your experience.
Man loves method.
Consume and create.
I think the golden rule, and I'd wrap this up with just examine your life, look at where you're consuming, look at where you're creating. I do think it's important to consume in a right way, which is like what you were saying, because like this is like a very like Christian idea too, probably other religions as well. I'm just biased towards being grown Christian, but I remember many Christian leaders talk about like what you put into your mind, your behavior, your thoughts, your emotions are going to be influenced by. And so really being mindful about what you're consuming and trying to consume the highest quality things that, and all like, our parents always say, surround yourself with the people you want to become. I think consume the things you want to become as well. And so if you really care about truth, consume content from people who also really show that they are in deep pursuit of truth wherever it may lead them. And when you listen to people that are a little bit more ideologically biased, be aware of that, and try to respond to that with empathy. Like, literally put your best foot forward when you're consuming and when you're creating as well.
See, I think I just like chaos, because I'll pick up Jeffrey Sachs and I'll like start reading his like economic analysis of China, and then I'll put that down and put on Beavis and Butthead, and I'm like, they farted, like,
but like, here's the thing. I think you make me have an existential crisis. The way that
you're welcome.
No, it's true. And I have a quote on my wall that love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself exists. And that's something that I have to remind myself every single day, because I feel like everyone else is like me. Everyone else wants to, balance consuming and creating. And like, and then you say some shit like that, and I'm like, dude, people operate so radically differently, and yet it's still a valid experience, and I can be okay with how they operate and how I operate, and we can still have a functioning society. And it's not an existential crisis.
It's a functioning society until you get that stereotypical person in the Nissan that's beat to high hell driving like a psychopath down. Then it's like, wait, never mind. We do not have a functioning society. What the hell is going on with that? Like, that person has no regard for their life or anyone else's. And it's always like a Nissan Altima, but you know what I mean?
Nissan Altima. We're not getting that brand sponsorship. Oh my god.
You strike me more as a Tesla sort of sponsor thing, but you know.
Dude, let's go. Two Teslas for the pod. Let's go.
We could not do some recordings in this, you know. Specifically, I want the OG Roadster.
Okay,
I don't want the
that's
X.
fair.
I don't want any of
That's
that.
fair.
Give me that OG Roadster.
I honestly don't care what the model is. Just give me a Tesla. I'm not a picky guy. Well, speaking of picky, I do have to go to work and I do need to eat. So let's go get some food.
Sounds good. Pancakes it is.